Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I am back with some homemade sugar sprinkles. These are super pigmented, create stunning speckles, and I wanted to play with them today and see if I could use them heavier to do some fun low immersion techniques like I like to do with acid dyes. I mean, I'm sure that we can, but I want to leave no sugar behind and play with this. Now, each of these colors used 5 drops of Wilton Colorite Color Performance System food coloring in brown, yellow, and then blue. Of them, the yellow has a slightly different texture, and it hasn't really changed since I first made it, but it feels a bit wetter. But nevertheless, these are the colors we will be playing with today. I have filled my pan with 8 cups of water and 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. One big perk of dyeing yarn with food coloring is that it's food safe, it's kitchen safe, and I'm personally comfortable using my standard cooking pots and pans for this type of technique. However, this pan happens to be dedicated for dye, and so it's one I don't use for food. So while I might use it to dye things with food coloring, I would never then use this for food. So you can use food coloring in dedicated dye pans, but not the other way around. I hope that makes sense. To dye yarn with food coloring, you need to have a protein-based yarn. So this yarn I'm using today is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. This is Knit Pick Stroll fingering weight yarn, and I use it all the time. You also need acid, which we have in our vinegar, the artificial food coloring, which we have mixed with sugar, and then heat. And when you combine all those elements together, then you can create some beautiful colorways. I did pre-soak the yarn for about 20 minutes before breaking it in. This is a lowish immersion. The yarn is at the surface in some places, but there's other places where the dye can hit the water first, which means that the colors will spread a bit more. But I'm excited. I turned on burners here and here to heat things up. So once we get nice and steamy, then I'm going to start adding in the color. Right, so our 3 colors, as I said, we've got yellow, and I'm going in heavy. We're not necessarily aiming for a speckled colorway today. I want to use this up, but also just show we can get some nice specks. But what happens if we go heavier and then say, come in with our spoon to get more of a wash of color in there. So clearly, right away, I even see that doing this, we're actually probably gonna see a bunch of, if I add it and then speckle, it's different from when I do this with acid dye powder, and I can say that right away. I mean, it sort of shimmies in, and you do see some speckles doing that too, but this is overall so much less pigmented than if I was dumping on just even acid dye mixed with citric acid or something. I guess it's kind of similar. You get some speckles and wash of color, but there's still not very much overall. And then finally we've got our blue, and this is just blue. So if I go and press it, and we did put in a fair amount of acid here, so if I go and I start moving right away, some of the bigger clumps will lead to some speckles in here, but we do get a nice wash of color. I do need to make sure that I'm going to keep enough, so that way we will have enough to dye the other side. But let's go for it and just add a lot. So total, there's about 15 drops of food coloring that I'm using. I probably should be wearing gloves because by not wearing gloves, I am absolutely staining my fingers, but I'm not worried a ton. Now, in the previous video, when I used a low immersion technique playing with this, we did see some spread. And that spread we saw, like when we flipped it, was encouraging. So we got speckles with a bit more spread over there. We'll probably end up with some green just because we've got yellow and blue. But yeah, the yellow, and this isn't because of any like dampness necessarily on my fingers. The yellow is just it's damper, it's more moist. All right, let's move this yellow through. I'm still not sure what caused that textural difference with the yellow. All I can say for sure is that these effects that we're seeing on here are different because yeah, this feels a lot more like dyeing with just dry acid dye powder. It is really, really fun and going heavy, and honestly, I don't think I've ever created anything remotely like this using food coloring before. So I am really, really excited. I bet that like later when I show this to people, no one's gonna believe that this was actually food coloring. And this technique and this style could be coupled with, this could easily be coupled with some liquid food coloring as well. It doesn't all have to be this powdered form. But I do actually, yeah, I do recommend that your hands are as dry as possible when you're coming in with the powders, because that will help it not stick. But the yellow is sort of an exception versus being the rule, because that is just sticking to my hands more. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna leave this for a minute. So in here we have 3 tablespoons of white vinegar and 8 cups of water. This is high for me. Normally I like to start with around 2, but I wanted to get some speckles on here, and I wanted some of that color to strike a bit faster. And then as I start to flip this over, you can see some of that color spread that I mentioned from the previous video, which is something that is honestly in this case good, because I don't want to have huge white patches left behind. But that color struck really fast. Sugar dissolves in hot water really, really easily. So all of that is working in our favor here. The depth of color in that yellow is fantastic. I wish that there was a bit more from the brown. But the blue, I think the blue is also gorgeous. This is nothing, actually, I don't know if I've even found brown sugar sprinkles before, but the blue is more pigmented than the sugar sprinkles I have dealt with. Okay, so maybe I came in a little late, but you can see those tiny little speckles that you can get. And then if I come in with my spoon, yeah, so if I don't wait very long at all, then they just sort of start striking. But if I come in, then it does soften them up a tiny bit. Okay, let's come in, and coming in with our brown, and I'm gonna come in with the spoon. Yeah, and see, that's not like the same depth and pigmentation from what we see with the blue, and that surprises me a lot, actually. But the one other thing to remember is that this brown is a mixture of different pigments. So the brown has, I think it's got maybe all of the 5 main molecules that you can get. So that's definitely worth considering as you're playing with it. If we're going to see color breaking, it's going to be from this brown. The yellow is just, I mean, I think yellow 5 or yellow 6, whichever one it tends to be, and then the blue is just blue number 1. But yeah, I think with the brown, I like the speckles that I get from it really well. They tend to be sharp and pigmented, but I'm not enjoying the spread, and I'm liking the spread more from our yellow and blue. But this sort of approach here is something that I love to do with acid dyes. I love to just apply the powders, let some speckles fall, wait a moment, and then come in and press the color and help it move through a little bit. It's just a technique that I really enjoy, and I have no idea if I'm going to get even close to using this up, all this color up. But also, we can go through and keep layering more and more color. 15 drops is not that much. And I will want to flip these skeins inside out and add some more color, but I am really excited. This is totally new to me with food coloring, and I think it is amazing. And the potential for the colors that you can create doing this is just phenomenal. Adding on some more brown speckles. Oof. And the nice thing about doing this is that when you get those bigger clumps, it doesn't matter as much because we want a little more spread, but I'm also adding some more blue. Yellow is hard for speckle anyway, even if you're using acid dyes, just because when you get really pigmented, it looks orange. And so even a bright yellow, the speckle doesn't have a ton of contrast, and so it doesn't show up very clearly. But check this out. This is beautiful. And I'm gonna let it sit for a couple minutes. Oh man. This is so fun. I definitely waited longer than was probably necessary, just because I don't think waiting that long was needed, because these colors are striking really fast. And the coverage is good. I almost would be okay stopping, but I do want to add some speckles to this middle area. I'm sort of opening up and trying to expose areas that have not had color from those previous rounds, and while also adding like some elements of randomness to it. There we go. And the more color you add, the more pigmentation you have, and so that is a factor as well. But the drier your hands are, except for this silly yellow, the drier your hands are, the easier you can sprinkle the colors on. So I recommend potentially even having like a paper towel or something on hand to wipe your fingers in between adding different colors. But oof, I mean, for being a bit more of a pain, the yellow spreads beautifully. All right, let's come in with some brown. I'm still wondering why the brown feels less pigmented than the blue. It certainly doesn't look it necessarily, but I'm enjoying having some fairly light brown sprinkles around and then some heavier patches of the color as well. Recently, I published a Kool-Aid video where I speckled it with Kool-Aid and then I overdyed it with pastel color. And this, if I was doing just one color, adding some of it and then spreading it out to get that little bit of wash, that would get a very similar effect. And that's actually something you could probably do just with the Kool-Aid itself. But I would probably have a bit more water. Oh, this is so pretty. Okay, that's a big chunk. That's the thing. I found that the speckles from using this low immersion are a bit sharper, but you still get some spread doing it that way. But I have to say, I like the colors a lot. I want some more blue. And now that we're going in, like, the colors don't have to be perfect and like the repeats aren't perfect. This gives it an element of randomness that I think is also lovely and fun. And I'm sort of spot adding some colors in certain sections to bring some more spread to certain areas, but still allowing some speckles to be present. I really thought that I was going to use all this up, and I was wrong. I suppose we could flip like one more time, and I've used up almost all the brown, but oh, I remember what I wanted to try. Oh well. Maybe I'll do like a bonus skein and I'll use all 3 of the leftovers, but I'm gonna let this sit for a minute or 2 now. I really like that there's some elements of green, but this overall feels blue and brown, and I'm feeling satisfied. I like the colorway. I like that there's some pops of white, and yeah, I think what I'm going to do now is I am going to let this sit for 10 minutes. Then I will remove it, set it aside to let it cool, but we'll give it 10 more minutes of heat. But I love it. I absolutely, absolutely love it. And these little speckles of splotches of color. Ooh. And this is so easy to do with food coloring. So easy. Let's wash our yarn. It really does look like we used acid dyes on this. I am so happy with how this colorway turned out. And right away, there's no bleeding. And hey, we even had a little bit of soap in the bucket already, but I'll add a tiny bit more just to show you guys. I'm not expecting bleeding to be an issue. Yeah, there's no bleeding, but we do want to rinse this a number of times because we did use sugar, and we want to make sure that sugar is completely rinsed out of the yarn. Thankfully, it's soluble in water, so once I am done rinsing this, I'm going to put the yarn through my spin dryer and then hang it up to dry. Using food coloring sugar sprinkles like I would acid dye powder is awesome. The speckles still aren't necessarily as pigmented as I might see with acid dye powder, but we were able to do a speckled with then mixed haloed look. And this overall splotchy, patchy kind of colorway, meaning the splotches and the patches in a very good way. This is a type of colorway that is my favorite to create, and I haven't been able to do with food coloring. I don't think I've tried this specifically with, say, Kool-Aid powder, and I think that there is some potential in that, but I mean, you can't get Kool-Aid in these colors. So this is awesome, so easy, and I cannot recommend this enough. And I have not yet shared any of these videos, and I am so excited to share it with you. So excited. I believe that this one is going to be its whole own separate video, but I did use up all the rest of these sprinkles. I combined them all together and layered them on this other colorway that I believe is another video, but I just wanted to show. And again, the difference, like, these aren't techniques that I've achieved with food coloring in the past. I mean, I've been excited this whole video, and I'm excited to explore this technique more in the future. And instead of sugar, next time I might try to make these sprinkles using citric acid powder, because that might help with sharpness. There's then not going to be sugar to rinse out, and that really will truly be a lot more like some DIY Kool-Aid. And so I'm super excited to explore this. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. Ring the bell to have your notifications on so you don't miss new videos. I publish every Tuesday and Friday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, and you don't want to miss any of it. And if you love the ChemKnits content and want to support us on another level, I do have a Patreon, and patrons can get really cool perks like early access to some content each month, behind the scenes sneak peeks, advanced notice of Etsy shop restocks, and more. You can find a link to the Patreon in the video description and in the top right hand corner of our screen. What colors would you most like to see me play with doing custom food coloring sprinkles? Clearly violet is going to have to happen. I haven't tried this yet with icing colors. I thought that starting with like a liquid drop might be a little easier for the beginning, but I mean, there's so much to explore. So much. But yeah, please leave suggestions down in the comment. I read it all. I try to keep track of as much as I can in a list, and Oh man, I love it when a project just opens up so many more doors and questions and things I want to explore. That is the best feeling ever. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.